This study found that men in long-term committed relationships had 21% lower testosterone than single men. In this video, I'm going to explain why this happens and what you can do to maintain high testosterone levels while in a relationship. If you're new to the channel, my name is Josh Vecchio, and I've spent the last 4 years studying male reproductive health. I graduated with a degree in biology and spent my entire senior year writing a thesis on male reproductive health. I used what I learned from writing that thesis to start a men's health coaching company while getting my MBA. And after helping several men optimize their testosterone levels naturally, I've taken what I've learned to YouTube to help men like you do the same. I also happen to be in a committed long-term relationship, so everything I say today comes from direct experience. Without further ado, let's dive right in. This study was really well done. They took the testosterone levels of 122 Harvard business students at the same time every day, which is important because testosterone levels fluctuate throughout the day. In the morning, they're higher, and in the evening, they're lower. So this study did a good job of making sure to take testosterone measurements at the same time to reduce any variation. And the researchers found that men who were in long-term committed relationships had 21% lower testosterone levels than single men, and this didn't matter if the men were married or just dating. They also found that fathers had 42% lower testosterone levels than the single men, so if you're a dad, this is especially pertinent to you. So you're probably wondering, why does this happen? Why would having a long-term partner lower your testosterone levels? Well, to answer that, you need to understand that one of the main functions of testosterone is it promotes mate seeking, and this makes sense evolutionarily. If you think back to our caveman ancestors, when a caveman was looking to reproduce, his body would ramp up testosterone production to encourage him to look harder for a mate to reproduce with. And this is the way that our species encouraged reproduction, because the two primary objectives of all biological organisms are survival and reproduction. So when testosterone levels are high, it encourages the organism to go out and seek reproduction. But when that mate is finally found, the body no longer needs to ramp up testosterone for mate seeking because the mate's already been found. And if you've been in a relationship, you know in those first couple months, you're having a lot of sex, it's really exciting. That's when testosterone levels are high. But once you start staying with the same woman for a long period of time, that excitement kind of dwindles, and that's because that mate seeking drive starts to lower. So once the mate has been found, the body dials back testosterone production to prevent the male from continuing to seek mates and reproduce, and instead focus on encouraging the development of his family. Because in human evolution, humans needed to work together as a family to raise offspring. That's one of the core unique characteristics of human beings. Other animals like tigers, the males can just mate and leave. But in human beings, we need what's called a nuclear family. We need a team, a tribe of individuals to help raise that child. So once the family has been created, the male needs to stick around and help support that family. But since testosterone drives mate seeking, if the male's testosterone levels are still up, he's going to be more focused on trying to find more mates instead of taking care of the mate that he already has. And this is why fatherhood further lowers testosterone levels, because once there's a baby in the picture, it's really important for the father to stick around to safeguard that child's future. And since human beings have been hunter-gatherers for about 99% of our evolution, our genes are still wired in this exact way. And in the modern world, nothing has changed. All of the pheromones and hormones that create this effect are still around. Now, I think there's another reason why testosterone levels might be lower in men in committed relationships. It's been shown that men in relationships have more sex than single men. Believe it or not, it's not the womanizer stud who goes out to the bars and picks up women that has more sex. It's very consistent that men in committed relationships have more sex than single men. Now, when most men have sex, they ejaculate. And following ejaculation, the body releases prolactin, which is the hormone that essentially has the opposite functions of testosterone in the body. And prolactin is what's responsible for the refractory period, which is when you can't get erect after an ejaculation. Prolactin is also the hormone that's released consistently when a man becomes a father to encourage pair bonding with his offspring. So the same hormone that causes men to reduce their mate-seeking behavior is released after ejaculation. And this makes sense because when humans were cavemen, after a male ejaculated, he essentially completed his job in mate seeking. So, where am I going with this? If men in committed relationships have more sex and they're ejaculating more often, and ejaculation increases prolactin, the hormone that is the opposite of testosterone, then it follows that by ejaculating more frequently, men in committed relationships might have lower testosterone levels. And this is scientifically supported. This study found that men who abstained from ejaculation for up to 7 days, or on the exact 7 day mark, had a 147% increase in testosterone. And again, this makes sense if you go back to evolution. If a male caveman hasn't reproduced in a while, his body's going to amp up testosterone to encourage him to go mate, to propagate the continuation of the species. So by not ejaculating, the body increases more testosterone. And since single men have less sex and probably ejaculate less, this might explain partially why they have higher testosterone levels. Now, this is all just my own theory, and there's a lot of different factors at play, but I really do think that excessive ejaculation in relationships is one of the reasons why men in relationships have lower testosterone levels. So you can probably infer that if you are in a committed long-term relationship, one way to help preserve your testosterone levels would be to ejaculate less. Based on that study, which found that on exactly 7 days after abstaining from ejaculation, testosterone increased 147%. It follows that you might not want to ejaculate more than once per week. You might be thinking to yourself, but I want to have sex more than once a week. Well, you can actually have sex without ejaculating. This is something that's been practiced in a lot of traditional cultures, but just isn't really well known in the West. It's called non-ejaculatory sex. You quite literally have sex and you don't ejaculate at the end. You keep it in your body. In fact, I would actually encourage you to have more sex because sexual activity itself has been shown to increase testosterone. But when you do have sex, just retain your semen. If you've never tried this before, you will feel like an absolute superhuman, replete with sexual energy, which sounds a little bit woo, but it is grounded in reason. And believe me, you will want to have sex again very soon if you practice non-ejaculatory sex. I really can't stress the importance of semen retention enough. In this book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, it's one of the best ever written. You've probably heard about it. In chapter 11, he talks about sexual transmutation, which is essentially the concept that you take all of your sexual energy that you would otherwise release in an ejaculation and you redirect it towards your mission or your purpose in life, which we're going to talk about next, by using your sexual drive for productive outlets instead of just spilling it out of your body. You can live a more successful life overall. If you want to familiarize yourself more with how this works, I would highly recommend you read this book called The Way of the Superior Man. He goes into a lot of the spiritual details behind it. So actionable takeaway number one for you is to have more sex in your relationship, but do not ejaculate more than once per week. Just try it out, and I promise you will feel like a new man. Now, another reason why men in committed relationships have lower testosterone levels is because a lot of men spend way too much time with their woman. To understand what I'm about to say next, you need to understand the law of duality. The law of duality states that everything in the natural world has two poles, and we can see this in many different instances. You have hot and cold, night and day, light and dark. The north and south poles create the force of magnetism, and the positive and negative charges of a battery create the flow of electricity. We even see this at the molecular level. Water molecules are composed of negatively charged oxygens attracted to positively charged hydrogens. Now, in human sexual relationships, the two poles of duality are masculine and feminine. And the more extreme the difference between the masculine and the feminine, the stronger the attraction between the two. Just like how the stronger the negative charge and positive charge of a battery creates a stronger force of electricity. But when a man and a woman spend too much time together, they rub off on each other, and the masculine and feminine become like one another. Since testosterone is responsible for the masculinizing properties of a man, if a man becomes more like a woman, How might that manifest biologically? Lower testosterone levels. Another way to think of it is using the analogy of a magnet. When you rub two magnets together, they demagnetize, and the force between them isn't as strong. And the same applies in human relationships. So for you, the actionable takeaway is not only to spend a little bit less time with your woman, but ideally spend that time with men doing masculine activities. Instead of spending your Saturday morning cuddled up on the couch in a fuzzy blanket watching Netflix, go out and do some jujitsu, or go for a hike with your buddies, or go do a workout with a workout partner. By spending time with other men doing masculine things, you will absorb their masculine energy and repolarize. You will strengthen the masculine side of the relationship. So when you come back to your woman, the attractive force between you will be stronger. And I would also recommend you to encourage your woman to spend time with other women so she can animate her feminine qualities. I can tell you your chances of having sex will increase. Just spending all day with a woman is not what men evolved to do. If you think going back to our caveman ancestors from whom our DNA is still based, the men would have spent most of their day with other men on the frontier, pioneering and foraging and making a way for the tribe, and the women would have stayed back in the cave with the other women, tending to the children or gathering food. Humans evolved for the male and the female to be apart for most of the day. In modern society, that's kind of taboo. You would think, oh, my woman's my life partner. I love her so much. She's my other half, and you spend all day with her. Well, that will come at the expense of the sexual attraction between the two of you, and that will manifest in your body as lower testosterone levels. You've probably heard the saying, distance makes the heart grow fonder. So actionable takeaway number 2, spend a little less time with your woman and spend that time with masculine men doing masculine activities. So before getting into the last and probably the most important point, I'll just throw in a little tip from experience here. When you're cuddling in bed at night, don't get me wrong, I talk about all this masculine stuff. I like to spoon, right? There's nothing better but make sure that you ice your balls before or after. Your testicles have a scrotum for a reason. And this is because your testicles need to be a lower temperature than your core body. When your testicles get too hot, they cannot produce sperm and testosterone optimally. So if you spend all night in the bed cuddled up with your girl and your testicles are right up against her butt, like when you're spooning, they spend all day at a temperature that's too high to produce testosterone. And to make matters worse, most of your testosterone is produced at night. So if your testicles are pushed up against your woman's body at night at a time when they produce the most testosterone and their temperature is not optimized to allow for that, then you can see how that might create some long-term negative effects on your testosterone levels. So all I'm saying is, if you want to cuddle, what I do is I just put a little ice pack on my balls beforehand, cuddle for a little bit, and then once you feel yourself falling asleep, make sure you just remove your body from hers and splay out at night, and definitely sleep naked to make sure your testicles are cool enough to produce testosterone at night. Probably something that most single men don't have to deal with right now, but for my taken guys who like to cuddle, you probably know what I'm talking about. The last and probably most important thing on this list is, if you haven't already, you need to find your purpose in life. If you are just droning along in some job that you don't like, or you spend your weekends drinking beer and watching football, or you're just smoking weed and wasting your life away, and by the way, weed and beer are both terrible for testosterone, but if you don't wake up every day with a sense of mission, and you're not springing out of bed excited to go contribute to society, that needs to change, and you need to dedicate the next however long it takes to discover what your calling in life is. And this doesn't matter if you're 30, 40, you can always find and change your purpose. I don't want to hear that you've been in the same career for the last 20 years and you don't want to switch. It's not an excuse. If you aren't excited by what you do for a living and by what you do to make the world a better place, that needs to change. And the way that this affects testosterone in relationships is as follows. We have to circle back to the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine poles. The priority of the masculine is purpose and mission in life. The priority of the feminine is love. And this makes sense biologically because, as we talked about before, male cavemen would have been focused on foraging and pioneering new lands, which is purpose, and women would have prioritized keeping the family together and making sure that the male and the female stay together to support the nuclear family. And that is what we today call love. So if you are not aligned with a strong sense of purpose, which is what it really means to be a man, biologically speaking, then your priority will naturally shift to love. And you might be a little overly attached to your woman, and maybe your woman, even worse, if your woman has a really strong purpose in her career, like she really loves what she does, and that's not a bad thing. But if her sense of purpose is stronger than yours, then you will start taking on the feminine pole, and she will start taking on the masculine pole. And then how does that manifest in the body? In you? Lower testosterone. So by aligning your life with some sort of a mission, whatever you love to do, your testosterone levels will increase. And this is actually shown in research as well. This study found that executives who attained high levels of status had higher testosterone levels. And that's because testosterone drives status-seeking behavior, which is associated with purpose. So by actively pursuing status through your purpose, your body will ramp up testosterone production to help support you in that direction. So takeaway number 3 is to find a purpose and work hard towards it. I can make a whole nother video on how to find your purpose, but the basics is this. Number 1, discover what you love. What are you passionate about? What do you find interesting? And number 2, find what you're good at. What skills do you have? What things come naturally to you? And then draw a Venn diagram with what you are interested in, and on the other side, what you're good at, and where they overlap. That's where you could probably find your purpose. So if you have no idea what your purpose is, it's time to do some soul searching, because a man without a purpose is failing his birthright and is an anchor in society. So if you don't have one, you need to find it, not only for the benefit of everyone else in the world, but also for your own testosterone levels. Based on all this, to my estimation, it's not necessarily long-term relationships that are the problem. And again, this is my own theory. The problem is that men in relationships ejaculate too often, spend too much time with their woman, so they become more like a woman, and they might not have a purpose in life. So they're more focused on love than conquering their mission in life. And the combination of all these things is how we end up with so many soft dads, or, what they call beta males in relationships, who are, bossed around by their women. So by not being like that, you can not only increase your testosterone in your relationship, but also live a more fulfilling life as a whole. All of the interventions we've covered today are relationship specific, and while they're helpful, if you aren't already consistently hitting the 4 basic pillars of testosterone optimization: training, nutrition, mindset, and toxin reduction, then these changes will only help a little bit. So if you want to learn more about those other 4 pillars, I've created a full course that guides you through testosterone optimization. You can find the link to that in the description below.